Hi all. It's good to see everyone today. Thank you for joining us for our coffee hour. Today we're joined by staff from the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, and they will be sharing information about the Family and Medical Leave Insurance Program and how that relates to conservation districts. And so a big thank you to them for joining us today. They'll be going through a short presentation, and then we'll definitely have time for Q&A at the end. And so if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll get to those at the end. But we will go ahead and turn it over. So thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Smith. I'm the communications manager over at the Family Division as part of CDLE. We're excited to be joining you today, and I have several of my colleagues on the call, two of which will be doing most of the talking before we open it up for questions at the end of the presentation. Michelle will be dropping in some helpful links into the chat as we go through the slide deck, and then we will open it up to the floor. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to David Gallivan to get us started. David.
Thank you. I'm David Gallivan. I'm the Compliance and Appeals Branch Manager for FAMLI here at the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. I want to thank first the Colorado State Conservation Board for having us here today. We love coming out to talk to people about this program and answer any questions that you may have. You're also going to hear today from Evan Grimes, who is in charge of our policy unit, and he's going to get into some of those more technical details as we go on, and we'll be here to answer those questions too at the end. And we're also joined by Tracy Pilata, who is our Employer Services Program Branch Manager, and she'll be around to answer some of those questions as well. So let's take a look at our agenda today. What are we going to talk about? We'll talk a little bit about just what this program is, our timeline for implementation, some tips on how to register. We'll explain a little bit about where our funding comes from, how we define wages, how you count your employees. I think we're going to skip over some coordination of benefits today, but feel free to ask any questions that you have on that. We'll talk about private plans, local governments, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end. So what is FAMLI? FAMLI is a voter-approved program that's going to provide paid leave for Colorado workers to take care of themselves and their loved ones during certain life events. We'll talk about what those are here in a moment. It's going to cover almost all workers in Colorado, including those who are self-employed. It is a social insurance program with both employers and employees contributing to the fund that's going to start paying out benefits in 2024. Right now, premiums are set at 0.9% of the employee's wage. And for most people, half of that's going to be paid by the employer and half can be paid by the employee or by the employer. The premium rate is fixed at that 0.9% through 2024. After that, we're going to be adjusting it every year, making sure that we've got appropriate reserves in the fund. But based on what we've seen in other states, and the highest we can go is 1.2%, but based on what we've seen in other states, we expect that the premiums are actually going to decline. And so we're looking forward to that in 2025 and onward with bringing those premiums down a little bit. So when can you use FAMLI? What are those qualifying life events? So for most people, you're going to get 12 weeks of paid leave per year once these benefits become available. And individuals who experience birth complications may be eligible for an additional 4 weeks for a total of 16 weeks. So the primary reasons why you can take leave are going to be to manage a serious health condition for yourself or to help with the serious health condition of a family member, caring for a new child, and that includes adoption and foster children within the first year of adding that addition to your family, making arrangements ahead of military deployment, and to deal with the immediate needs and impacts arising from domestic partner violence or sexual assault. And this is going to cover, as I said, almost all workers in Colorado, including those who are self-employed. So what's our timeline look like? What are we looking here for implementation? We are actually pretty deep into this timeline. So the My Family Plus employer portal is available to all employers now, and that's at family.colorado.gov. And so we'll show you the basics of how to register with that here in a second. The next big milestone we're looking for is January 1st, 2023, and that's when deductions start. So anybody who's being paid wages who falls under this program, which again is going to be almost everybody, they got to start having those payroll deductions come out in January 1st of 2023. Employers need to get registered with our system sometime before the first premium payment is due on April 30th. So you'll be paying those premiums quarterly. You want to get registered by that first quarter. For the first collection, there's going to be a 30-day grace period, but you do want to get into that system, get registered, make sure you know how to file that. And then the big milestone is going to be January 1st of 2024. And that's when we open the doors and benefits start becoming available. So I was talking a little bit about how important it is to get registered. So let's talk about what you need to do that. We've got a handy dandy checklist for you on how to get registered and some things that you should have available when you start this process. Of course, the contact information for the primary administrator of the account and a second authentication method. You got to get that two-factor authentication going. You don't want anybody to get into your account who shouldn't be in there. So the person who sets up the registration process for your employer account is going to be the primary account administrator and is going to need to set up that multi-factor authentication. You're also going to need your business's legal name, your federal employer ID number, the primary location address, and the mailing address, if those are different, your total employee headcount. And here in just a little bit, Evan's going to walk you all through how we count employees. It might not be as easy as you think, although I think for this audience, maybe we'll be able to make that pretty easy. I heard a dog bark and I'm about to say, you got to introduce us to the dog now. That wasn't in my office. I'm not allowed to bring my dog in, but I'm always happy to have furry people learning about this program as well. And then you also do need the name and email address for any additional users you'd like to have access to on your account. You can also add those additional users after registration. So you can have multiple people working in the system, which is never a bad thing. It's always good to have backups. So on to registering. So the first thing you want to do is navigate to family.colorado.gov, and Michelle has very happily put that link into the chat for y'all. And so on this page, you're going to find step-by-step instructions for employers, local governments, and third-party administrators. We do have know-how videos on how to register and how to submit your opt-out letters if you're a local government that has elected to opt out of this program. We also have quick reference guides and file specifications for those TPAs if you're using a third party to set this up for you. So we have the resources that they need. And on this page, you can click on the Log into My Family Plus Employer button, which takes you right to the welcome page. And I think we got a picture of that here. So this is what it looks like. When you visit for the first time, you need to create an account. And you're going to create that account with login.gov. And then once your account is created, you click that blue button, sign in with login.gov, and that will bring you right into our portal. So that's how you register and how you access the portal. But let's talk a little bit about funding. Where are we getting this money that we're paying benefits from? Who's paying into it? Pretty straightforward. First thing we look at is how many employees do you have? For a company that has 9 or fewer employees, or an employer, I should say, with 9 or fewer employees, all they're paying is that half premium, that 0.45% that they can deduct from the employee's wages, or they can pay on behalf of the employee. For bigger employers, if they've got 10 or more employees, then they're going to pay that full 0.9%, and they can deduct up to half of that from the employee's wages. For self-employed individuals who want to participate in the program, all they're going to pay is the employee portion, that 0.45%. For local government employees, if they are participating, if they are employed by a participating local government, or if they are participating on their own after their local government has opted out, they're just going to pay that 0.45% as well. Local governments have the right to opt out. And so if their employees also choose to opt out, there's no premium. If there's a self-employed individual who chooses not to participate, they don't pay a premium. And if there's an employer out there who's elected to go with a private plan instead of the state system, then they're going to be paying to that private plan, not to us. So that's how we're going to be funding this. And let's take a little bit of a look at wages. So how do we define wages? We wanted to make this really easy for people. So what we're doing is we're mirroring the unemployment definition of included and excluded wages. We do have a summary of these wages on the employer page of our website. We're working on some more materials just to make that a little bit more accessible. So employers, though, who are exempt from paying unemployment premiums, for example, churches and religious institutions, are not exempt from paying into FAMLI. So we don't follow unemployment's employer exemptions, but we do follow their definition of wages. And we do that because we want to make it as easy and painless as possible. We don't want people having to count some things as wages for unemployment and other things for us, so we follow it. Premiums, though, are only paid on wages up to the federal Social Security wage cap. That does change every year. The Social Security Administration will amend that. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about what that is right now later on in the presentation today. But you want to keep track of that every year. We'll keep people updated, but that does change. And we do have a link of payments that are considered wages. And oh, wow, that is already in the chat. Thank you, Michelle, for getting that out there. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Evan to talk about some policy questions, starting with how do you count your employees?
Sounds good. Thanks, David. So when it comes to counting how many employees you have, your employee count will be calculated once a year by counting the number of employees that were employed for a total of 20 or more calendar work weeks in the preceding calendar year. So in 2023, employers that report having 10 or more employees who worked during 20 or more weeks in all of 2022 will be required to pay the employer share of the premiums for all 4 quarters in 2023. And employees that are on paid or unpaid leave, including sick leave, medical leave, leaves of absence, disciplinary suspensions, whatever, will be counted as being employed during a week, so long as the employer expects the employee to return to active employment. So here's another way to visualize this 20 calendar week concept. And we got a few examples here. Our first two are seasonal workers, both of whom worked during 20 or more weeks throughout the calendar year. It's important to note that they both worked intermittent schedules throughout the year, and worker 2 only works 1 or 2 days during certain work weeks, but they are still included in the total toward the 20 weeks worked, and therefore in the head count. The third full-time worker worked for more than 20 weeks and would also be counted, even though, as you can see, that this worker left the company in August. And then finally, the final full-time worker here in the red box, let's say this worker was hired to replace the worker number 3. This employee would not count toward the total head count because he only worked during 19 weeks in the calendar year. So another question we are often asked is how to count remote employees. As you can see on this graphic, if the employer has more than 10 employees, even if they work outside of Colorado, the employer will still be responsible for matching the 0.45% employer premium for its 3 employees who do work in Colorado. And then the same concept applies to national employers who have employees all over the country. As you can see on this map, this employer has 15 plus total employees. Therefore, this employer will be required to pay and remit the full 0.9% premium for its 8 employees in Colorado. Next, I want to talk briefly about what FAMLI will look like for employees once it's up and running in 2024. Here you can see a few ranges of what premium deductions and benefit payments will look like based on an employee's wages. When taking eligible family leave, employees will receive up to 90% of their wages based on a sliding scale. Now, benefits are capped at $1,100 per week. Benefits are also proportional to the average weekly wage for Colorado and therefore may fluctuate over time. We have a benefit amount calculator on our website to help families get a rough estimate of both their deductions and their eventual benefit payments. And again, premiums are paid on wages up to the federal Social Security wage cap. So as that cap changes from year to year, so will the family premium cap. Now, next, before we dive a little bit more into private plans, we want to emphasize that nearly every Colorado employer will be required to provide a robust paid family and medical leave program, whether they participate in the state-run family program or secure a private plan that offers equal or greater benefits. The only employers who aren't required to provide equal or greater benefits would be federal employers with employees in Colorado, some railroad employers, and local government employers who vote to opt out. Now, here's the difference between these options. First, regarding private plans, private employers will have the option to get their private plan approved by proving to the family division that their private plan will be in place by January 1st, 2024, and will provide equal or greater benefits than the family state plan. Self-insured plans are a subset of private plans and will need to follow all the same rules provisions and get approved by the division just like other private plans. The only difference being these employers also need to secure a surety bond in order for the division to vet the financial standing of the company. And then finally, local governments are the only employers who can truly opt out of the family program and not be required to provide an equal or greater private plan. The family statute was written to give local governments this flexibility, which was also outlined in the ballot measure. Now, more about private plans. Our private plan rules are adopted. We gathered extensive feedback from various stakeholders during a public comment period, and you can review the complete set of rules on our rules website. But in order to qualify for an approved private plan, employers must offer a plan to all employees that provides all the same rights, protections, and benefits as Colorado's Family Paid Leave program. So in order to be approved, a private plan must offer at least the same number of weeks of benefits, offer at least the same level of wage replacement for each week of benefits, include no additional requirements or conditions, deduct no more from employees' paychecks as the employer would be allowed to deduct under the state plan, cover all employees through the duration of their employment, and of course, remain compliant with any additional requirements established by the family division. Now, we understand employers need time to shop around and consider their private plan options, and that can't happen until the private plan marketplace practically opens up later this year and early next year. Therefore, all Colorado employers will begin paying premiums in 2023, and those who secure an approved private plan effective on or before January 1st, 2024 will be issued a refund of paid 2023 premiums minus a private plan administration fee within 90 days of approval. We anticipate opening up the private plan marketplace sometime between the first and third quarter next year, at which time we will provide more guidance on how to apply for private plan approval within the My Family Plus employer portal. The deadline to submit a private plan application and receive a refund for 2023 premium payments will be October 31st, 2023. But the biggest takeaway here is that all private employers will pay premiums next year, and while they shop for private plans, and then will be refunded once their private plan is submitted and approved by the division. Next, I want to talk about local governments who, unlike private employers, have unique options available to them. But first, we did revise the definition of local government to clarify that any employer that is either covered by Colorado House Bill 22-1133, which involved the state of Colorado's prepayment of premiums, or has at least one employee in the state personnel system, is not a local government. But anyway, this next slide goes over those three options available for local government employers. The first option is to simply participate in family. This means the local government agency agrees to pay the employer share of the premium, which is 0.45% of wages if there's 10 or more employees, and 0% of wages if there's fewer than 10 employees. The employer would also agree to remit the employees half of the premium, along with the wage data to the family division on a quarterly basis. The second option is to decline all participation in family. In order to do this, the local government's governing body must hold a vote to do so. The local government must then notify the family division of their vote to decline participation. The decision to decline is good for 8 years, and the local government must hold another vote if it wishes to continue opting out beyond 8 years. And finally, employees in this scenario would still have the option of voluntarily participating in the program, but the individual employees would be responsible for registering with the family division, remitting 0.45% of their wages, and submitting wage reports to the family division on a quarterly basis. And then the third option is to simply decline employer participation in family. This is still technically an opt-out, and the local government would still have to vote to decline participation, but the employer would essentially provide administrative services to the employee to help them with their participation in family if they elect if they elect program participation. So this would look like the local government employer would facilitate voluntary payroll deductions, and they would remit the employee's share of the premium and submit wage data for the employee to the family division on a quarterly basis. Now, employees of local governments who opt out and voluntarily want to participate in family do not need to take any action until they can self-elect coverage when benefits become available in 2024. That means if you're a local government who plans to deduct and remit on behalf of your employees, you don't have to start those deductions until 2024. And with that, David, I will hand it back to you.
Right. Well, it is still the time to start working and communicating with your employees to let them know about this program. And we have some required notices and some other tools that may be useful for you. There is a required program notice that you have to post by January 1st, 2023. It outlines all the legal requirements and protections of the program. There's another break room poster that's in the middle of this slide that we think looks quite snazzy, and it summarizes the program nicely. It doesn't replace the program notice, though. And we do also have a payroll stuffer that can distribute to employees with irregular pay stubs. If you're writing paper checks, it can go in with a check, it can go out electronically. It's just designed so that when employees open up that paycheck and they see that deduction, there's something in there that explains why it's happening. That's just a tool that employers can use if they choose to. And we do have an employee handbook that's available too. All of these resources are available on our website, and so feel free to make use of them. We do have some additional resources as well. Besides the break room poster, we have an HR fact sheet. We have a local government fact sheet, sample pay stubs. We have an online calculator. If you're as bad at math as I am, you can use our calculator to figure out what those premiums are supposed to be. We have a complete local government guide along with a poster and sample notification. And I do just want to say, we have heard from a lot of local governments that have decided to opt out, who are coming back and saying, well, do I still have to post the notice? And as Evan just pointed out, yeah, you can have those employees, though, who are still going to choose to participate, and you have to let them know about their rights underneath this program. So even if you are a local government that's opted out, that program notice is still required. And that's the kind of thing that's covered in that handy dandy local government guide. We do also have resources for third-party administrators. And this is an ever-growing list. This is a program that we are building in flight right now. It's been a work in progress for the past year, and we're going to continue building it over the next year. And we're going to keep adding resources as we identify new needs and as we build new systems. And so in light of that, as we are growing, as we are building, we really do want to hear from you. So of course, we have our website out there. There's an option on our website to sign up for the newsletter, so you'll get monthly updates. We have an email address so you can send questions in. That is right now probably the best way to reach us. We are on all the socials. Well, not all the socials, most of the socials: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're not on TikTok yet. That one's still a bit of a debate. Nobody wants to see me dancing. So I think we're sticking to these core four for the moment. But we really do want to hear from you. Use these channels to reach out to us. And I just want to add, one of the things that we are doing a lot of at the moment, because we're building a program, is rulemaking. If you sign up for our newsletter, you'll get notices when we're going to have rule hearings, and you can participate in those. You can send in written testimony. You can actually log in to the rule hearing. You can hear what everybody else is saying. You can testify on the record. And that makes a huge difference. It's so much easier for us to get good rules that are actually going to meet the needs of our stakeholders when we hear from them. And so I love it when we have a lot of people who want to come participate in a rule hearing and share their opinions on those draft rules. So feel free, reach out, keep in touch with us, keep sending in any questions that you have that we're not able to get to today. But with that, I want to turn it over to questions. So if there are any questions, Evan and I and Tracy are going to try to do our best to answer those for you.
Thanks, David. We did get one question that came in during the presentation, just asking in general, what are most conservation districts? What category do they fall in? Are they considered local governments?
And so my understanding of how the system works is that really, if we're looking at something that is organized under state authority, there is a state statute that authorizes it, and you have a leadership that is either elected or appointed by the government, and you're receiving state funds, you're going to be leaning into that local government category. I would suggest if you have a staff attorney or an attorney on retainer, it might be good to talk with them. We're experts in family here, not necessarily on government organization, but really, if you're working under an elected board or a board that's appointed by the governor, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to fall into that local government category.
Thanks, David. We have a question here from Sarah. What if our conservation district doesn't currently have any employees, but we anticipate maybe adding some in the next few years. If we opt out now, can we opt back in when we bring employees on, or would those new employees just have to participate individually? There's a lot packed into that question. Let's take it one by one. Evan, I'll hand it over to you to talk about what to do if you don't have any employees first.
Sure. So if you don't have any employees, then you're not an employer. So if you're a local government without employees, then you don't even have to register. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to vote to opt out. It would be if and when you do obtain employees, then at that point you would have to register, because now you're a local government employer. And then at that point you would have to decide how you want to participate, whether it was option 1, 2, or 3 that we described before.
Thanks, Evan. And then in general, if a local government opts out now, can they opt back in? Yeah, let's just take that one for what it is.
Yeah, so a local government that opts out can change their mind and later opt back in. But if they do that, then they have to stay in the family program for at least 3 years. This is to avoid any employer basically opting in just long enough to reap the benefit of participation and then opt right back out. So yes, that's entirely possible. Now, if a local government opts in initially, and doesn't first opt out and later opt in, then that 3-year requirement doesn't apply. That requirement only applies to local government employers who initially opt out and then later decide to participate in the state.
Thanks, Evan. This is sort of related. My conservation district has decided to opt in, but I am the only employee and I don't live in Colorado. What should they do?
I mean, it sounds like they don't have much to do because they don't have any Colorado employees. So, well, that employee, if they don't live in Colorado, that's not necessarily dispositive of whether or not they participate in the family program. The question is primarily, do they work in Colorado? And so if they work in Colorado, but they live somewhere else, then that individual would have the option to individually opt in. The district decide to opt in. Well, then if that individual works in Colorado, then they could probably expect some premium deductions from their paycheck, and they would be able to use the benefits in 2024.
Thank you, Evan. And here's one from Heather. She's asking, how does this feather in with FMLA?
I can go ahead and address that. So obviously the big difference is that federal FMLA is not paid. It is just job protections. Family includes job protections, but also the pay. And those job protections can run concurrently. So if you're following everything that you need to do under the federal rules for the FMLA, and you're following everything that you need to do under family, the job protection periods are going to run concurrently. But then there's also going to be some pay benefits coming in from the family division here at the state to cover that individual.
Thank you, David. And I'll take this question from Gretchen. She's asking, our board voted to opt out in November. What steps do I need to take to make this official with family? Gretchen, you will need to register with the division following the prompts that we talked about with My Family Plus Employer. When you go to select your organization type, you need to register as a local government. And once you register, then you'll be able to click on the opt-out section and upload the results of your vote. We have instructions, how-to guides, a how-to video specific for local govs on our My Family Plus employer page on our website to help you through that process. But yes, if you have voted to opt out, you do need to notify the family division before the first of the year in order to avoid being liable for those premium payments next year. David and Evan, feel free to jump in if I missed anything.
Sounds good to me.
A question here from Nancy. How do we handle part-time employees? Evan, do you want to take that?
Sure. Basically, part-time employees aren't handled any different than full-time employees, seasonal employees. If they're working in Colorado, then their wages are still subject to premiums. And if they have to miss work for a qualifying condition, then they can still be eligible for benefits as well. Also, they do count toward the head count in determining employer size, so long as they're employed during 20 or more work weeks in the previous year. So it doesn't matter if employee A works 20 weeks and works 5 hours a week, and employee B works 20 weeks and works 50 hours a week. They both count toward that head count because they were both employed during 20 or more work weeks.
Thank you, Evan. Sort of related, Mitch is asking, a seasonal employee who is hired in 2024 and hasn't paid into FAMLI yet, do they get benefits should something happen during their work time?
They can qualify for benefits once they become a covered individual. And a covered individual, to be a covered individual as an employee, except for those individuals who self-elect coverage. But for this employee, they would likely, well, it depends. If this seasonal employee is an employee of a local government, and the local government opts out and this individual opts in, then yes, they're eligible for benefits immediately. If this seasonal employee is either an employee of an entity other than a local government, or the seasonal employee is employed by a local government that has opted in to the FAMLI program, then that employee has to hit a $2,500 wage threshold to be a covered individual. And that means they have to have earned $2,500 basically over the past 5 calendar quarters in wages that were subject to FAMLI premiums.
Thank you, Evan. We have a great question here from Mariah. Her district uses contract 1099 staff. So do I understand correctly, it's a district with no employees that doesn't need to register, or do they need to register?
I can speak to that. So what we look at is the person an employee, or are they not an employer? Are they an independent contractor? And so normally we would look at, if somebody is on a 1099, they are an independent contractor, or we hope they're an independent contractor because that's what they should be to be getting a 1099. And in that situation, if all that you have is independent contractors, then yes, you have no employees and you are into that realm of not needing to register. But you do want to make really sure that the people who you have under a 1099 system are in fact independent contractors, that they're free from direction and control, that they're not actually employees. And that's important, not just for FAMLI. My background is in workers' comp, hugely important there. Evan's background is in labor standards, hugely important there. When we see people talk about 1099 staff, it's one of those things that we always want to emphasize, that you got to make sure that you're doing that properly. But if you do have people who are independent contractors who are properly 1099, then they are not employees, they are independent contractors. And if that's all that you have, then yes, you don't have any employees.
Thank you, David. Julie asked, in the slide it says 0.45 as in almost half of wages, question mark.
You can sense the panic there, and I want to get to that really quick, because if we tell people we're taking half their wages, there's going to be pitchforks and torches outside our office. It's 0.45%, so it's slightly less than half of 1%. So it's again, I am very, very bad at math, but if it's for like $100, that's going to be 45 cents out of every $100. And Evan, you can check me on that and make sure I'm doing that right and giving people the right number.
Oh yeah, you're totally right. It's 0.45%, but when it comes to like multiplying one number by another, you're going to multiply the wages by 0.0045.
Thank you, Evan and David. Looks like we've gotten through all of the questions in the chat. We still have a little bit of time left, so feel free to type out some more questions or raise your hand and we can unmute you. But if we have covered everything, I will hand it back over to Kayla with any final thoughts. And let it sit for a few minutes for anyone who may still be typing.
Yes, thank you, Jessica. So just a quick update. We will be sharing again this recording on our website. So be sure to check back there if you have any questions or if you want to see these slides again. And I will also send out an additional email with all of these links that were provided in the chat, just for future reference too. So be sure to keep an eye out for that as well. And it looks like we have one more question in the chat there, Jessica.
Thank you, Kayla, from Mariah. For further follow-up about 1099 contractors, can you provide Evan and David's contact information, please? And thank you. We can share out the email address that we have on the screen, and we'll make sure that you get the right answers from the right folks. We want to be very protective of Evan and David's time. They're very busy people, but we will make sure your questions do get answered if you email that info box.
All right, everybody, ignore my email address.
Oh,
It actually,
well, and Evan put it in. So if Evan put it in, then
it is actually beneficial if it goes through the general box, because then it does get routed to the right people. And also then we have a record of it so that the next person who asks can look, instead of just having it all in my email box. I sometimes forget I'm part of a team, and other people do this job really well too. But also, if you do have questions, I'm not off limits. Please do feel free to ask, but it is helpful for those to come into the general box.
Hey, Jessica, it looked like Sarah Hamilton might have had a question so far unaddressed, wanting to go over again when the employer versus the employee is responsible for paying the premium and how much. And so
Sorry
basically,
go ahead, Evan.
oh yeah, no problem. And so it's helpful to think that premiums have to be paid by the employer, and then the employer has an option to offset its obligation with deductions from its employees. So first, how much does an employer have to submit to the state? Well, that depends on your size. If you have 10 or more employees, then you have to submit 0.9% of everybody's wages. If you have fewer than 10 employees, you have to submit 0.45%. And in either one of those circumstances, the employer has the option of deducting up to 0.45% of its employees' wages to contribute toward that. Therefore, if an employer has 10 or more employees, then it can have its employees contribute up to half of the employer's obligation. And then if an employer has 9 or fewer employees and it has that lower 0.45% obligation anyway, then it can require its employees to fully fund that obligation.
Thank you, Evan. Sorry to miss you again, Sarah. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to get them in now. Thank you all for joining us again. We appreciate you spending time with us today. I'm going to put up the screen with our additional resources too. Right now, as we approach the end of the year, we're really leaning on our employer partners to communicate with their staff about impending deductions that will begin in January, or if you've opted out, being sure to notify your employees that you have opted out and getting those opt-out letters to the division by registering with FAMLI and using My Family Plus Employer to upload your vote notices. And with that, I will hand it over to David. Evan, do you have anything else to emphasize before we sign off?
I just really do want to emphasize how much we love hearing from employers. If you send questions into that general email box, a lot of times that tells us that there's questions out there we need to do a better job of answering on our website. You participate in rule hearings, we get your critical insight into how the system should operate. And so please don't be afraid. to reach out to that general email box to participate in those rule hearings, follow us on the socials. We want this system to work for you and your employees, and you letting us know how that works is the best way for us to get there.
And really quickly, we do have just one more question from Garrett. He asked about, could you please review the seasonal employee 20-week section? Is a week defined as 40 hours?
Well, that sounds to me like an Evan question.
It's a great question. A week isn't defined by how much you work during the week. It's just a calendar week. I don't recall off the top of my head if it's Monday through Sunday, or exactly what the week span is. But you are considered an employee during a week if you work 20 minutes on a Wednesday, or if you work 60 hours Monday through Sunday. That looks the exact same as far as determining your head count and whether or not that employee was employed during a calendar week. So there is no, it's not like counting FTEs. It's just counting how many people worked or were employed during that week, regardless of how much time they put in.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that, Evan. And for all of our districts, again, just joining in on the Zoom today, I definitely encourage you to sign up for their newsletter. It seems like that's a really great resource for additional information. And like I said, I'll send out an additional email with all of these links that they included. We will post this video on our website, and reach out to the Department of Labor and Employment at that general email if you have further questions. They're super snappy at getting back to you. And so I definitely encourage you to reach out to that email if you have other questions. But if there are no other questions for today, I want to thank everyone for joining in on the Zoom, and then specifically the staff from the Department of Labor and Employment. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to help out with this. So we really appreciate that. And so if there aren't any other questions, we will go ahead and wrap up for today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.